It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belghast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 502. Tonight I'm joined by Ammo.
Hello.
Grace.
Hello.
Kodra.
Howdy.
Tam.
Hello.
And Thalen.
Roused hour.
Speaking of which,
Happy
they
Thanksgiving week, I guess.
they are
Happy
continuing
American
to work on the WildStar emulator server.
Oh, amazing.
It
But
has
also,
regular updates.
nice. But also, Mystery Science Theater did their Turkey Day marathon again this year and had a bunch of stars involved. And one of the movies in the marathon was Final Sacrifice.
Oh my!
Yeah,
Nice.
they somehow, I guess, convinced the director that a sense of humor is a good thing. I don't know. But yeah, like first time legally available to watch in I don't know how long. As of right now, they're still like rerunning the Turkey Day marathon. I don't know how many times they're going to rerun it, but it's a really good episode. That's part of what's made it, such a thing that it was unavailable for so long, is that it is a really, really good one.
Nice.
I mean, I'm unfamiliar with this.
Zap Rousdower.
Zap Rousdower, played by a man who looks remarkably like Larry Zonka. So the movie Final Sacrifice, it was like a student film made by a guy who has since become a fairly like well-known documentarian.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, once the initial rights, ran out, he was unwilling to allow Shout Factory to renew them. We don't really know why. And anytime anyone would upload the Mystery Science Theater version of the movie to any service anywhere, like within weeks, it would get a takedown notice. So,
Well,
but it's a very fun movie, and the gang are really firing on all cylinders, riffing it. So, like that's part of what makes it good, is it's not actually a bad movie as far as student films go. Like it's a cheaply made movie.
Yeah, and it's that name. It's that name, really.
Yep.
But hopefully it will actually be in circulation again for a while.
That's my hope, is that maybe this means that it'll actually get put up on the Gizmoplex and be available for the people to watch, easily.
Yeah.
I have a copy already, but lots of people don't.
So one of the things that I have been doing in the lull before Path of Exile 2 is I have attempted to revisit Starfield, and I didn't get super far into Starfield. Like, I made it as far as a major plot reveal, but I don't remember why I stopped playing. I'm sure I was interrupted by something, but that game is kind of off-putting.
Yes.
And the core problem, I think, for me is it has every bit of the Bethesda jank in a package that looks like a modern, better game. And like, obviously trying it immediately following Dragon Age Veilguard was probably not a good comparison piece.
Possibly not.
But also, like, I just, it's so like deeply uncanny valley playing that game, because like it looks like a modern game, but it very much does not have modern game sensibilities. It has like some of the most stilted dialogue.
Yeah.
And
it's surprisingly awkward.
Like
I feel like the main complaint I've heard over and over about it is it feels half baked. Like it feels like it wasn't like it got rushed out.
It feels like a total conversion mod for Skyrim. Like that's really what it feels like, because all of the tropes that you're used to in Bethesda titles, well, specifically Skyrim, of NPCs floating up while you're talking to them, random things glitching through the walls. I am permanently stuck on a quest right now, and it's a pretty early quest where I was going to join the Freestar Rangers, which is one of the factions. And I did some intro quests, and I was extensively going to be introduced to the Marshal. So one of the janky Bethesda follow the NPC through the building quests. That was fine.
Yeah.
Problem is, when I got up to the Marshal's office, the Marshal is reading a book, which means he is flagged as busy.
Uh-oh.
He's stayed there permanently. He's in the corner reading a book, and my escort is standing in the same room and keeps doing idle lines anytime I get close to her.
Book. It's a really good
because
book.
because she's waiting on the Marshal to stop reading, and
He's been waiting for the latest Brandon Sanderson for, years.
yeah, like that's what Cena said earlier was, just start A Way of Kings. He'll be there for months. But yeah, like it's just like and I've done research, like there's no way to reset it. Like the only way to do it is to execute a console command to force him into an idle state. But executing any console commands bricks achievements. So like that is a path of last choice, and like the other option is, you brick your achievements because you had to run a console command, so you have to install a mod to re-enable console commands.
Good grief.
But like I will say, I kind of do enjoy roaming the galaxy in their particular version of spaceflight, because it is just arcadey enough for me to actually enjoy it.
Yeah, like I hit this weird place with that game where there are some really cool parts about it that I think are actually like compelling, like just compelling and neat and fun. It's got a lot of jank.
Well, and it's got the same problem that every Bethesda game has ever had, where the side content is actually kind of interesting, but that main story really isn't at all. So as long as I'm just doing side content, I'm pretty happy. The main story...
See, I actually like the main story of a number of Bethesda games, but granted, I feel like they have been falling off lately. I feel like they did a very good job with Morrowind. I thought Morrowind's main story was pretty good.
I mean, I don't even have to go that far back. I thought Skyrim was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I like Skyrim's main story.
I thought Skyrim's main story was good.
My main problem with it was I wanted a third option to be like, both of you are awful. But yeah.
I also actually will say I think I like Fallout 4's main story mostly fine.
I didn't. Like there were too many contrived dead ends in that story where like you had to do this or that or this or that.
I think my problem with it is more that in general games like Fallout or Skyrim are not, they look a lot like Mass Effect or Dragon Age or Deus Ex. But they are not those games, and they're not trying to be those games. But they look close enough to them that when you're getting, they are systems games that happen to have a story. They've got about the depth of the story is like your average ARPG or RTS or whatever. And by those standards, they're great. But if you're comparing them to this is trying to tell a story like Cyberpunk is, like BioWare is, like no, it's definitely not that.
And I think that's really like where I'm going with this is the fidelity is not there anymore, and it's really the same game that Bethesda's been making over and over and over, and you could just swap out the resource packs and achieve the same goals. Like, yeah, they had to build some new systems for this one, but also it's mostly just loading into new screens. Like yes, it technically looks like you're flying between places, but like really you're just like loading into new instanced areas a lot.
Yeah, it feels really disjointed, and I feel like a lot of what's really cool about it is lost in that disjointedness. And like I'll talk about it a little bit later in the show, but it is really striking to me to see Starfield as a game that is made by a studio that releases games on the regular and knows, where you can mostly get away with doing smoke and mirrors to not have to do a ridiculous amount of work versus a game like Star Citizen that is absolutely devoted to like, yeah, you can seamlessly walk around on planet and then get in your ship and get in the cockpit of your ship and fly away in your ship and it matters. Because if you could do that in Starfield would be incredible.
Well, and then there's the problem that like Starfield is kind of devoid of stuff. Like a lot of what made Bethesda games interesting were all the weird little set pieces that you would stumble upon out in the world. And
and that's the thing, right? Is there's a ton of that in that game. You just don't have to see any of it because you can fast travel. Like in Skyrim, it's because you have to walk places, and keep on running into stuff. But like because you can just like I realized that because I was fast traveling directly to my destination as opposed to like doing
Flying.
Yeah, like it flying, but like doing the awkward in between flying thing where I'm like loading into my ship so that I can fly my ship around just long enough to like point myself in the right direction and hit warp so that I load again into another place where I'm going to do that like 3 or 4 more times.
Having to navigate your way out of a hangar bay and get out of Atmo.
Well, you don't even do any of that. You hit the button on your ship and you just load, and then you finish loading and you're in orbit.
But like that's kind of my point is like that's sort of the keep like I heard the word we always used to use for Bethesda games is boy these feel immersive. Like they make you feel like you're in this world. And like what you're telling me sounds like this big part of it, which is space travel, doesn't feel very immersive because it's mostly just fast travel.
But it's more than that, though. Like, it feels like you have one planet's worth of detailed POIs spread out amongst 50 planets. Because, like, when you do land on a planet, there are 1 or 2 interesting things on the entirety of the planet. And like, if you go to one of those bespoke areas, those are dressed and really interesting, but there's miles of nothing otherwise. And that's the piece that like it feels like there's a Skyrim's worth of content in Starfield, but it's just spread out way more thinly over a lot more land mass.
Yeah. And like and like the space stuff, when I would manually like it was painful, but manually doing all of those things, you run into random encounters, some of which are really cool and really interesting. And like some of my favorite and most fun content in that game was just like, oh hey, traveling from point A to point B, you run into some random encounter. You just don't ever do that if you're fast traveling. And not fast traveling is so onerous that I would, unless you're just like really in it for the immersion.
Yeah, like I spent the afternoon hopping back and forth between star systems looking for pirates because there's this one perk that you have to level up by taking down encounters with your crew, but you encounter them so infrequently that it just felt like I was roaming the entire galaxy looking for anything to fight because I needed to do it in a starship. But yeah, it's not awful, but Lord, is it not a good game? Like, I mean, it's a playable experience. It's not the worst thing in the world. It probably doesn't deserve half of the ire that it riled up, but also like it's just kind of uninspired. And it's kind of sad because like the source material could have been really cool.
Yeah, there's a bunch of cool. There's a lot of cool stuff in there that it's doing. It just doesn't quite all come together.
Well, and then there's moments where like the NPCs know way more about their world than I do, because like there's this whole heartfelt series of dialogue when you find out that one of your crew members is like of this cult, but also at that point when I'm getting the dialogue, I don't know anything about the cult. Okay, sure, like it has no gravity because like they haven't done a great job of introducing the world and the factions. You know, like and there's been several times where we're supposed to care as to why Freestar and the UC have traditionally been at each other's throats, but like that's not actually come up. You've told me there's things there, but you haven't given me any reasons why I should care about either of these factions, other than one is Space Texas and one is generic sci-fi, futuristic city.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like Elder Scrolls did a better job of onboarding me into that world. And maybe it's just that Bethesda hasn't had to really do that for a really long time because people know Elder Scrolls and they don't have to tell as much information anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of legwork. I mean, a new IP is really, really hard. And like there's a ton of legwork. If you can just say the Brotherhood of Steel are in this area in a Fallout game.
Mm-hmm.
And it even if you have never played a Fallout game, if your response is this game didn't tell me who the Brotherhood of Steel are, what people are going to say to you is it's Fallout. You know who, like you're supposed to know who the Brotherhood of Steel are. Like even it's just like accepted that you know what that is. And I think that like that's the power of long-standing settings, is that you can kind of make those connections without it being, necessarily a big deal. Like I replayed Fallout New Vegas recently, and your like companion who is ex Brotherhood of Steel, it's supposed to be like a big shocking reveal, but like if you don't know who the Brotherhood of Steel are when you meet her and go through the whole thing, it is absolutely meaningless.
Well, and it's especially interesting because at that point, the people who are interacting with that character might only know the Brotherhood of Steel from Fallout 3, which is very different from the Brotherhood of Steel you're dealing with in that game.
Yeah.
These aren't the happy, shiny Brotherhood.
But I always wonder with games like so we've talked about like how the best thing games like this has ever done was when Tyranny decided to just like context sensitive highlight every single proper noun and like give you a quick rundown of like what this means in context.
Yeah.
I wonder if there isn't some evolution needed on that, like, hey, this conversation is covering this topic. Like, I would like to have the next bit of dialogue be an internal conversation with myself on what the heck does my character know about this topic. And, like, if you want to get really fancy, like, based on the origin I've selected, what would they think of them?
Yeah, I mean, there's a. I mean, you wouldn't have to get very fancy with that. You could say it's your, what's it called? Like one of your dialogue options is consider, or just
Yeah,
like
exactly.
think about. You just have like a dialogue option that's just like, hey, remember what is this thing? You can even get fancy with it and put like skill checks around it.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked for Disco Elysium.
It works great in Disco Elysium.
Oh, it gets so funny in Disco Elysium. Like Disco Elysium is definitely doing this fancy.
Disco Elysium is an absolute masterpiece that I cannot recommend enough to every single person. It's so good.
I kind of think the thing with Starfield is for a first game, it should have been a tighter adventure with like a smaller scope so that they could invest time in world building so that by the time game number 2 came out, you could have a more open, game because you'd at least set the groundwork up.
Mhm.
I think this is where Bethesda gets into a problem of their reputation is these big sprawling world games.
Yes. That was
Yeah.
And
exactly
so
my thought.
they felt like they had to go too big.
Yeah, that was the vibe I got to. Like it was they were trying to follow up their other games with a new game that needed to be more constrained.
I mean, to me, it feels like they had a really cool tech demo and then decided to try and build a game out of that tech demo. Because it feels like they built the tech first and then the world second.
I mean, I don't even hate that. Like, if you're trying to build a vertical slice, that's probably how you should go about it. It just sounds like whatever they were doing was probably too expensive. Like, they needed to understand like what was going to be the cost of developing the game that they were trying to build, and probably ultimately just ran out of resources.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Not that any studio would ever have the resources to make the game they were going for.
yeah, like the game that this wants to be is an unbelievably expensive game. I mean, look at Star Citizen, a game that is about as much game as Starfield, but focusing on different elements. And it's taken a very long time and struggled a lot in the process. The more games you put in your game, the harder it gets.
The harder it gets to game.
It's rough, man.
So something with a much tighter focus, I think we've mentioned this at least once before, but Dungeon Clawler is available and is adorable and you should play it.
Agreed.
So it's very adjacent to Roundguard and Peggle and games like that, except for this time you are fighting with a claw machine.
Oh, okay.
I love it so much. Yeah, every fight is you alternate. You get usually 2 tries in the claw machine to see what you pull, and whatever you grab is what you use to attack the enemies and defend yourself. I don't know. I'm a sucker for claw machines. I've always loved them, so I really love this game. But it's also just really fun to see all of the different weapon types and how they interact with all of the different classes or characters that are available with their special abilities. There's a lot around the material that the items are made of. So, for instance, there's items or abilities that will fill up the claw machine with water. And when that happens, the metal things sink and the plastic and wooden things will float.
And you can get super situational items like a water gun that fills up like with the liquid that just got drained into it and does an attack based on the type of liquid that it got. But also, if you get that when there's no liquid, it's just a useless item.
Right. Or like there are bath bombs. So if there's one of those, then it will turn any water that's in the machine into lava or poison. And yeah, it just has a lot of add-on effects. So it's just really cute and deeper than it has any right to be for it, as simple as the concept is.
I mean, my favorite thing are the globs of sticky stuff, which in themselves don't really do anything, but they cause a lot of things to adhere to each other in a clump so that you can pick up the clump easier.
But you have to be careful because if too many things are in the clump, then it's hard for the claw to grab the whole thing. Yeah, I've been making my way through the characters. I played through some of them in the demo, but I'm just working my way through it now that it's a full game or full early access game. So I just beat a run with the character who has one regular claw, and then the second claw is always a magnet. So it'll pretty much only pick up metal things, but it'll single out metal things. And yeah, beat that run by finding the alchemist and transmuting a lot of other useful stuff into metal so that my magnet will just pick up everything. It's the interactions like that, I think, that make it extra fun.
Well, the art style's great too, which doesn't hurt.
Yes. Yeah, extremely cute, a lot of fun, and all the satisfaction of a claw machine without spending all your quarters.
Yeah.
That part really does appeal.
Yes.
I remember going to an arcade in my hometown that was closing at one point, and they were just like, whatever, claw machine on free play. And it was very satisfying.
I will say the claw in this game is way better than any claw in any claw machine I've ever used.
Yeah, this claw is fair. It's what a claw machine claw should be like, but never is.
Like, sometimes it's hard to pick up larger items, like there's a great sword that hits all enemies on the screen. That one's difficult to pick up, but it's well worth it if you can. Veilguard structure.
So I have started playing Veilguard finally, and this is the first Dragon Age game I've played since Origins. I didn't even complete Origins. So, like, I'm going from the beginning to the modern day. And maybe
I cannot understate how wild a jump this is, because there's almost as much difference between Dragon Age entries in the series as there are in Guild Wars titles.
Sure.
Yeah.
But, like, the thing that most is jarring me is the fact that, like, I am playing this game and, like, it's extremely episodic. Where the other games did, like, where, like, rather than, oh, you have a quest, open up your map and go to this place and go do something. It's like, all right, you have a quest. Here's where you go to start that quest. We're going to start you to the beginning of that quest. You're going to do that one quest, and then we're going to, like, end that episode, and you're back to, like, an interstitial moment.
Yeah, they've all been that way.
Everything after Origin was like that.
The Origins was that way too. Like
Origins was not this way.
No,
there were clear time periods that you didn't have control over. Like, there were points of no return, but, like, it felt episodic to me because, like, we're now in the fade section of the game. We're now in the deep road section of the game.
Those are so big. Those sections are big.
They're really big, and Veilguard has a UX thing that it's doing that's like the equivalent of the end credits of the episode every time you finish a thing. And you had that in 2, and you had Inquisition was a little weird about it, but you had a little bit of that in Inquisition too. But there wasn't something quite that explicit in Origin.
Like, it feels extremely consumable because it's like, oh, now like, it feels like I'm playing through a Saturday morning cartoon type of thing.
It works really well, I think.
It does work really well.
It's weird. It's weird to see, like, Origins to that is really weird, but I actually really like the structure, and not only because it's a good place for me to be like, I'm going to take a break and come back tomorrow.
Yes.
As opposed to, I'm going to talk to this NPC and be stuck here for half an hour.
It also releases content in these episodic blocks as well, because, like, you will revisit the same areas numerous times, and different plot lines will be going on in each of those areas. Some based on your decisions, some just based on the state of the world.
But like, is it always just sort of like a here's a mission that you're doing, and the mission might have changed because of like previous choices, or does it ever get to the point of like, do you want to go to Arlethan Forest now and see what's going on there?
To some extent, like, so this is clearly a game that exists after Final Fantasy XIV existed, because there's a main story thread, and then there's companion threads and faction threads, and those are all happening at the same time. And realistically, like, you want to evolve them all at the same speed. You don't want to mainline the MSQ and ignore your factions and ignore your companions, because bad things will happen. So like, essentially there's 3 kinds of quests going on, and you want to devote time to all of them.
Okay, I have yet to get to the point where I can choose what type of quest I'm even going on. So it does sound like that's eventually, but like, it still sounds like everything is episodic.
So the game is very on rails for the first little bit, but then it branches out and becomes significantly less on rails, where
Okay.
you're tasked to, like, it will give you 3 hot spots and you need to determine what order in which you want to do them.
Got it.
Like, it opens up the further you go, but yeah, like, immediately it's very on rails.
I just thought it was really interesting because this was like not what I was expecting. I also think, like, again, this game has very fun combat that I wish I could play multiplayer. Like, I'm sad I'm never gonna get Mass Effect 3 multiplayer again, because they touched that hot stove once and will never touch it again.
Mass Effect 3 multiplayer was so much better than it had any right to be.
It was so
remarkably
good, and they got punished so hard for making it. Like, that's going to always be my, like, what if the world was ready for Mass Effect 3 multiplayer when it came out? What timeline would we be living in then?
Yeah, unfortunately, they probably would have forced Mass Effect down the live service avenue if that was a thing that they even realized they could have done. But yeah, I'm guessing you're probably not super far into Veilguard yet then.
I mean, I'm not. I've done what, 4 different quests where it's definitely the moment where it like hard cuts to the sinister villains like cackling in their lair, being like, "Ah, yes, your plan was foiled by the intrepid heroes, brother." Or sisters, like, well, we'll just have to figure something else out using this other material. It's like, this is not the type of tone I was expecting. Like, I did not expect to smash cut to Rita Repulsa's like lair, but after I completed a mission.
Which ironically, they did not do in Origins, but they have done ever since.
Okay.
You
Yeah,
might actually, like, I think it's a little dated and it was a little janky when it came out. I think you would have really liked Dragon Age 2.
Yeah,
I think that would have made you into a series fan.
Veilguard is way more a spiritual successor to the second game than it is
Very
anything
much so.
else.
Yeah, like, very, very much so.
And to be fair, there's a lot of people who did not like the second game. I thought the second game was just fine. I enjoyed it.
I
enjoyed
bounced
the
off
second one
the
a lot.
series after I played the second one. But
I
I'm
totally
still
get it.
thinking about trying this one because it's been a while since I played a Dragon Age.
It's definitely goofy.
I mean, like, it's Dragon Age with Genshin combat. So
yeah, I've been liking it just because it's more lighthearted.
which is weird because they're also dealing with very heavy subjects. But like, the thing that I like the most about Veilguard is there's no character I can't stand.
Yeah.
Like, traditionally in a BioWare game, there's that one character that I would throw out an airlock if I could.
There's always a Corso Riggs.
Yep.
Oh man,
And there's
games
not
have been
one
getting
in this.
so much better at this.
Like, there's characters that are rough around the edges, but like, they also have very redeeming qualities here. Like, so you end up falling in love with all the characters by the time it's all said and done. Corso rigs.
Oof.
The funny thing is like Corso's not even the worst version of that character in a BioWare game, but has become the template for the one I grumble about the most. So, Star Citizen Free Fly event was last weekend, wasn't it?
It's still going on, I think. It's currently the International Aerospace Expo, which I want to be honest is sort of a wet fart of an event, because this year they didn't need it to be like a huge bonanza. So like IAE is their big sell all of their ships, put everything on display, try every ship that you have ever thought about for even a second, and we're also going to release a bunch of new ships just to juice the event. And hopefully you get in, hopefully you see all of these cool ships and whatever fancy thing that you've never really wanted to try, but you weren't willing to spend money on, and maybe you love it enough to buy it or whatever. And you can tell how good the year is going by how much effort they put into this event. Like as far as the game's development is going. Last year it was a bonanza because in like February of last year, they were like, hey, we're working on some really big features behind the scenes. Don't expect to see like maybe one more patch by the end of the year. And it's one of those game development things where like sometimes you need to move a big rock or break a big rock, and that's going to require your team focusing on it for a long time, and the game is not going to appear to move or improve for that entire time, and then suddenly it's going to leap forward. And that's one of the things that I've always been kind of amused / skeptical about with Star Citizen is that like when they hit those points, it's really rough because they're running their development as a live service alpha test. So there's people who are like, this is the game I'm trying to play and nothing's happening. I'm bored.
Mm-hmm.
And a year's 10 months is a long time to go without updates to the unfinished early access game that you're playing. So yeah, last year's IAE was a big deal. This year it has been broken, like fundamentally broken. They normally do the thing. They have a handful of like expo halls in game, and like a lot of the event it's set up like it's an industry event, like go in, like a car show basically, but for spaceships. And so they have expo halls in game that they populate with all the various ships, and you can go to. They have usually 2 halls that they fill up with ships, and it's been fundamentally broken since day one, where only the most recently updated one you can visit at any given time. So it's literally half of the available stuff to go see because they have an elevator bug, and they're just like, it's just not a priority to fix. Like I've seen them go into full on panic mode to fix this kind of thing in the past, and this time they're like, whatever, it's sorry, we understand there's an issue. There's probably not going to be a fix before the end of the event. And it's because people are mostly out playing the game. This year has been a whole bunch of interesting release stuff. They have completely revamped their flight model, which it feels iterative. I don't think it's going to be how the game actually finishes, so to speak. But it's definitely a big change, and it's made a bunch of PvP players mad. So I already start in the like, this was probably a good decision space. But it basically reduces the speed of everything. So you're much less likely to get into these kinds of jousting space battles where you're just like zooming at each other, trying to get a few shots in, and then trying to turn as fast as you can so you can zoom again. Which is just like not a terribly great experience. And so this year they've upped that, revamped that flight model, and then also rebalanced all of their PvE combat. So you've got like this, you're fighting things at different difficulty tiers that actually make sense for you fighting, as opposed to the game just being balanced by ship HP. Because it turns out tiny, fast ships have very little HP, but they're super annoying to fight if you're like a new player. It just makes the lowest difficulty stuff next to impossible. And so as a result, you've got this whole different, whole different combat space, like space combat space, and they've added a whole bunch of new like ground combat missions and AI, which have been really fun this year. Including some. I think I might have talked about it on the show previously, but some incredibly legit. Like, you need a team for this. It's multiplayer. It's multiplayer in a way that is asking you to be in multiple places at once in an interesting way. They've also added just more expansive locations to fly to with their own series of missions. So there's just a lot more content to do. And they just pushed out cargo and hauling missions, along with the persistent hangar, and cargo being like physicalized, as opposed to, you hit a button and your cargo is on your ship and you're just looking at numbers. Like, now cargo is, you got to load your cargo onto your ship. And which means that you have a hangar that you go to that you can set up however you like, and whatever you leave there stays there. You got your own instanced hangar. So you can do things like set up ships and load ships into other, like load ships and vehicles and cargo into other ships and vehicles and cargo, which just gives this very like tactile feeling to everything.
Yeah.
And it makes hauling actually pretty fun. Like, one of the coolest little bits of tech they have in the game is their tractor beam, where you can like physically move objects around with like, beam physics. And it's both cool to see in action, but also fun to just make, load. It's just fun to play Tetris with your cargo, see how much you can fit in your ship. A lot of times when you go out fighting other ships, like if you go on just like a mission to blow up other ships, those can be cargo ships, and they might be carrying cargo, and that cargo could be worth money. Maybe you hang out a little bit, and instead of blowing that ship all the way up, you just disable it and take the cargo, and you just get a little bit of extra payout. And it's vastly changed the overall experience of playing the game, because now I'm not just taking the punchiest fighter I possibly can, because maybe I want to fight some stuff that's got some cool loot, and I want some place to put that loot.
I mean, that was always one of my favorite parts of Privateer, was taking out ships and then seeing what cool cargo they were carrying that I could then snag and take to try and sell. And maybe it's illegal drugs, and I sure hope that the cops don't catch me before I can get into dock.
Yeah, and like that is a legit experience that you can have now. Every so often, you like go through the cargo of a ship, and it's just, you hit the jackpot, and it makes it just a fun. Are you going to ignore that and just like chain run these missions so that you're like killing super efficiently, or are you going to go at it a little slower and play more of the game systems?
And so are we at the point in the game's development where if you blow up a ship and just leave cargo floating out in space, that it'll be out there, and maybe somebody else could, maybe being a scavenger can, become viable?
I have heard that you can do this. They have their cleanup scripts are a little bit too aggressive to like reliably do that. You don't have like a huge window before stuff starts to despawn. Like if there's no player entity within a particular radius of things, they'll start to despawn. But like their cleanup scripts are getting less and less aggressive like every week. And they're tuning them so it's not just like first in, first out.
Yeah.
Because there's a bunch of like people just leave like trash all over the place. Like if you drink a bottle of water and then you've got the empty bottle, people just like drop it on the floor. So like space stations have a trash problem. And they're working on that one. But yeah, it's so much more of a gameplay experience. Especially as more components are coming online as well. Apparently, sometime soon, the three big things that they're planning on releasing like imminently are finally the second star system.
Pyro?
Pyro is on the public test servers now. Like if you're like on the test, there's like obviously the current alpha, but there's like the test server. If you can get on the test server and like go to Pyro now. So they finally have that potentially up and running, and that's evidently a big deal. But also engineering gameplay, which looks fascinating.
That's cool.
It looks like a big part of it. A big part of it is repairing internals on the ship, but the other part of it is power management and being able to like tweak your ship's output in certain ways to get performance in interesting places, which I think sounds really cool. But forcing me to lose a bet. The other thing that they demoed some really early stuff last year, and in their like showcase this year was they say in the next 6 months, I will believe it when I see it, but base building?
Ooh.
Like land on a planet and make a base for yourself. To the point where they've updated a bunch of the ships that have base building capabilities and announced a handful of upcoming base building ships to release alongside it, as opposed to the one they had previously. And they introduced wildlife to planets.
Ooh.
Which
what can you do with wildlife?
Depends on who you ask. Mostly, you get eaten by it if you don't know what you're doing.
Sounds reasonable.
Which, yeah, but they don't have they have a few of it. Several of them have you can like hunt them for loot, and it's like fairly valuable loot, but they can and will kill you. Others will like get onto your ship if you leave it open and like eat your components, which is pretty funny to me. Like close your ship door.
You don't want rats.
Yeah, don't get rats, basically. And I don't know a ton about the others, but that's another thing that they've added. Like they started with like 3 and now they're up to 10 or 11 in the last 3 months. And I haven't played a ton. I've mostly messed around with some of the new ships and learning the new flight model, like stuff I'd already done but relearning it, and cargo hauling, which is fun. But they're also doing their Gates of Encourage event. For the opening of Pyro, which is an interesting choice. I'm maybe overselling that. They're doing a big event that is like leading up to the opening of Pyro and then continuing into the start of Pyro that they're using to like seed the initial faction structure there based on who the players support.
Okay. They
seem mildly miffed that players are overwhelmingly supporting the peaceful faction. But like let's bring supplies and help people out there, and maybe they won't all be super murderous, as opposed to the let's go in there and murder everybody faction. But yeah, it's been there has been a lot that has come in over this year in a relatively low key sort of way, and it's been like even just hopping in, it's like, oh, okay, they've made this game. There's a lot of things that are different in this game. I no longer feel like most of the interest in the game is, did a new ship come out? Let's play with the new ship. There's major systems that I just want to explore now. Oh, and they've added like 14 new racetracks.
Oh, So we've determined that racing is a key part of this game.
Racing is a extremely legit part of this game now. Like there are racing missions where you can go race. Fly to a location and run time trials on the tracks, and there's enough infrastructure now for players to run player-run racing events because they have the terrain and stuff for tracks now. Racing ships matter. You can make money doing it.
I think it'll be really interesting if they ever get to the point where there can be player-run shipyards designing their own ships. I mean, I realize that has been a profit center for them, but
So one of the things that they have said they want for base building is crafting of ships and ship components, a la Star Wars Galaxies. So it's probably not going to get to like design your own ship, but there's very likely going to be some amount of build your own ship to a certain set of specifications.
I mean, that's honestly like one of the cool things about Starfield is the ability to build your own ship out of prefab bits. And
Yeah.
like mostly it's customization, but you could also like greatly determine, what all your ship can do based on the structure that you just built.
Yeah, these Star Citizen ships are they're like a little too designed for that kind of thing to not like super stand out. And the other thing is that with the big update to the flight model, basically every ship in the game had to be rebalanced, and so there are more ships that have a niche that are interesting and totally worth flying than I think I've ever seen in this game. The just like diversity of ships you can fly and have a good time is so high right now. It's pretty cool. Their new thing is trying to make ships that are valued in ways that are not just about how many and how big guns do they have on them, which is having somewhat mixed results. But I applaud them for trying. But yeah, it's really interesting to see what they've done. I think I mentioned last year that like this year might be the really big year for Star Citizen, and I think that is still very possible if they can get Pyro out in a working state by the end of the year. They seem to want to do. But cargo and cargo hauling being a like real and legit and actually kind of interesting and fun, chill. It's not like, pulse pounding, raucous adventure. It's like space trucking.
I do like galaxy trucking.
It's chill and it's fun, and like there's a certain amount of how do I there's just the right amount of let me figure out like a good route, and how do I arrange my cargo in my cargo bay to figure out so that I can unload it properly for each of my stops, and that it's actually interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna be playing a bunch over the next few weeks and eyeballing when the big pyro comes out, when the big pyro thing comes out. They also released the biggest ship they've ever made this week, like as a flyable ship, and I have no idea what anybody's doing with it, but people seem to be having fun with it. It's a big patrol ship with a hangar bay.
Clearly, you're going to need it for fleet maneuvers.
Things I will believe when I see it. But I keep saying that about this game, and I keep seeing the things. Like, I would have told you as recently as last year that base building was a pipe dream that was never going to show up. And now are we going to see base building in the first or second half of 2025? And that's wild to me.
I'm curious what base building entails, but yeah, I'm excited.
I've watched some of the videos, but I don't know what that's going to look like. We shall see.
So from one pile of systems in a game form to another pile of systems in a game form, Stars Reach.
So Stars Reach did an alpha test recently, by which I mean, what is today? Yesterday and today. It's real early days.
Yeah.
I feel like I know where this is going. It feels to me, for all the world, like somebody who might or might not be Raf Koster said, you know what the problem with Star Wars Galaxies was?
Uh-huh.
All of the Star Wars part.
Oh.
I
What if-
mean, in his defense, that is the part that, led to non-game designers sticking their oar in things.
yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, and right, like, I can understand how you get. I absolutely understand how you get to this place. But also,
And the IP was also why people tried to play that game.
Yeah, I was going to say.
right, the what I played of Stars Reach felt like a toy. There was not, like, yes, you could do things and you would get XP for them to some end that I did not ever get enough XP to recognize. But it was a whole lot of, here, do this thing for its own sake. Do you want to do this thing? Yeah, because you want to do that thing. You are the kind of person who wants to do that thing, therefore you should do that thing. And it's not a game. Is like, yeah, you can shoot things if you want to shoot things. If you're into combat, you can go combat things. Some of those things might even fight back. And like I said, it's early days. There may be a point in which there's a little bit more context of any kind, but I think when a game purports to be a sci-fi game and drops me into a temperate wilderness,
Uh-huh.
I'm already starting to check out a little bit.
Oh, rather than like a sci-fi city to start?
Or anything that tells me that this is a sci-fi space at all, other than the things that I or other players put there. Like, you could put down a camp where you could mostly just put these little, like, hollow barriers up, and it was cool because they were lit. You could see them from a pretty good distance, but nothing felt like a space that mattered. What am I doing here? Why? Other than the fact that these systems exist, why do I care about any of them? And I at one point I was wandering around and I was like, I don't know, I have this blaster thing that's like not a super satisfying. It's not a super satisfying gun, but at least it's something, I guess. And there were like deer running around, so I was like, all right, whatever. See if this works. Shoot some deer. Learn that system. It's got a thing that I can't decide how I feel about, where, like many MMOs, if you hold right click, you look around. You like move the camera around.
Okay.
If you don't hold right click, you get a cursor on screen. Your character will aim towards the cursor at all times.
Like,
Which
is
makes
this a third-person game or an isometric game, or
This is a third-person game, at least defaulted to third person. It was definitely novel to be able to like easily be running in one direction while shooting at a target that's not directly in front of me and tracking that target with my cursor. But it definitely made movement feel really janky. Not helped by the rubber banding. It was weird. But I shot at some deer, and the first thing that popped up were these like emotive thought bubbles. It was like a thought bubble with an emoticon. It was like first an angry alien, and then like I kept shooting and the deer died, and several other deer became a scared alien. But then after a moment they became angry again and like tried to attack me, but they were really far away, so when they got like partway back and I had already moved away a little bit, I could look back and see that they had like a tired emoji.
this seems like what if The Sims had combat?
It felt like that. It felt like there was a complicated system under the hood about like how do these creatures feel when they see violence near them, or get over their initial fear and decide to get revenge, and down and going on and on down the line. That somebody's like, oh, isn't this so cool? This is so cool. But like the actual experience as a player was, I don't know, the deer ran around and emoted at me. Did I know what any of that meant? No. Did it affect what I did in any way? No. Could it have? Maybe. But like, would it have changed what I was doing? Like, not really. And there were a lot of little things like that. I did finally log out in frustration because I thought I was exploring a cave, I was like, oh, a cave. Let me see what's in here. But like, what was in there was weird, uneven proc-gen terrain. And while I could climb, there was no way for me to climb out of that hole. So I was like, all right, well, I don't know how to get out of here. Invert Y was not in, so my patience was going to be pretty thin to begin with.
Mm.
And that was a point at which I was like, all right, I think I'm done. I wish them the best. I want them to figure out who wants to play that game. Like, who is that for? Because I think that was the other thing that stood out to me was like following people in chat and just watching them run around and do stuff. It was very, I guess I hit buttons and see what happens. And every so often somebody would settle on something and then do a bunch of that thing and then try to figure out, okay, now what? But I am fully skeptical.
Yeah, I don't know. The other game that I've been kind of looking at this week, not playing, but looking at, is Ashes of Creation, which I was kind of excited about and now completely skeptical as well.
I mean, I think I said this in one of the channels that Ashes of a Creation at this point seems like it's more MLM than actual game.
Yeah, I can see that argument.
There's a lot of promotion, but like not a lot of fruit of said promotion.
Also, like fundamentally anything that is purporting to be just an open world PvP game, I'm not going to be like, I don't care. Nope. Like, they're like, hey, there's a flagging system that encourages like healthy open world PvP, and I was like, oh, cool. Like,
How?
Like in Ultima
How exactly?
Online?
Talk me through that one.
Yeah.
Actually.
Oh, it's a complicated flowchart. So
I bet.
there are 3 flag levels. There's green, purple, and red. If you are green, you can fight other green players, and you will go purple if you kill them. If you are purple and you fight a green player, you will go red. If you are red, you can still fight other green players, but you have a big debuff on you.
Where's the one where nobody can fight me?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, what color is that? Is that like?
No, that's you're playing the wrong game.
Why?
Yeah.
I suggest the devs of Ashes of Creation look at Fallout 76 and how much PvP happens in Fallout 76.
This is like my game dev hill to die on. Like, what data is anybody looking at to even start to think this might be a good idea?
The
I don't
depths
think-
of their own grognard heart.
It's gotta be. And like, what gets me is who's funding that?
It has yet to work out ever.
I mean, it worked out in EverQuest.
It didn't.
No, it didn't. Those
It
were
was
two
a
servers.
disaster at EverQuest.
Those were
Yeah.
2 servers that were the lowest pop servers.
Oh, was there only 2 servers that were open?
Yeah.
PvP? Okay.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
What,
Ralosec and
the other one I don't remember the
Zek.
name of.
The 2
There were the 2
Zeks.
servers that were open PvP and the 2 servers that were RP PvP, which, whoo boy, that was just team PvP where your selected species was the team. It was like what? Humans, elves, evil, and like dwarves. I don't know.
Herodites.
It was a mess.
Yeah, like they were not popular servers. Like back in the day when you could see server numbers, they were always at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it was miserable.
No, when given a choice, the vast majority of people choose no. I do not want to be ganked. Ever. This is not new information.
It doesn't, even in the one game that people hold up, it doesn't really work. It's just that game has been around long enough that some people are like deeply invested in it. But like EVE Online is a unicorn. You don't use a unicorn as your baseline. And like,
Well, and isn't the attach rate on EVE Online just like
abysmal.
in the basement? Yeah.
It's terrible.
And-
People don't stick around.
And from what I understand, like honestly, other than the what is effectively auction house PvP stuff, like the number of people that are actually duking it out for sectors is a very, very, very small group of people in total.
Yeah, no, and nobody wants to do that because that would harm the money machine.
The capitalism. The
Yeah.
capitalism must continue.
Yeah, like no, fighting and like losing material, like that's bad for capitalism. That costs the org money, which is hilarious to me. But like the other things that people hold up are like, ooh, Rust, ooh, Tarkov.
Yeah.
Like, buddy,
And those are totally different types of games.
like Tarkov doesn't hit, like, I don't think Tarkov hits 6-digit concurrency like ever. And for reference,
But those are
like,
also like, again, I don't know these games. I actually have no idea how Tarkov or Rust works, but I thought like there was at least some persistence to Tarkov.
yeah, and there's some in Rust.
But like that's also the whole darn game. And like they're not really MMOs.
Yeah, like to provide a bit of perspective here. Tarkov's estimated player count monthly, let's see if I can find monthly. Roughly 27k players daily based on some estimates. Up to like 250,000 monthly. World of Warcraft, that game that has famously been bleeding out, is at 8.8 million over the last 30 days, roughly. Like,
Yeah, like
and
it's low used compared to what it once was, but it's still way higher than that.
and like we don't and I need to be super clear here that like both of these are small fry when you're talking about actual games with actual scope in the games industry right now. League of Legends, another game that's kind of like long in the tooth and nowhere near as popular as it once was. 145 million monthly.
Well, I mean, the big dog, Fortnite, is well over 200 million monthly.
Yeah, Fortnite was 221 million in 2022.
Man, League of Legends is still 145 million? That's wild.
That's an estimate.
That seems high.
And like it's super hard to find, but like I mean, yeah, Fortnite's over 230 million a month. Roblox, which I don't really love to think about, is 380 million monthly. Like if you're coming and being like, oh yeah, you can be a big game at like you should make your game like Tarkov, that game with like 250k monthly players. Like we're not even talking about the same scope here. We're talking about somebody's grandmother who makes jam and sells it at the local's farmers market versus Welch's.
But my thing has always been, this has been tried so many times,
Yeah.
and they've never succeeded.
But maybe this will be the time they do it. It would work great if not for those darn players.
This is the Arrested Development. No, all of them were fools. It never works out, but I think we could do it.
Yeah, like
so first, assume your players are perfect spheres, all interchangeable. I don't know. I mean, and maybe one day someone will find the magic secret sauce that makes it work. But as you have said, I will believe it when I see it.
Look, I can solve this right here, right now. Hey, Grace, what would it take for a game that anybody could kill you randomly in to be something you want to play? Is there even an answer?
I mean, it could pay me in real dollars to play it.
Yeah, right?
That would work. I would probably do that for something equivalent to my salary, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to pay me to be the sheep, I could maybe get behind that.
There were moments where I was enjoying flagging in New World periodically, just sort of as like, I'm not actually going to participate in PvP. I'm just going to like sort of try and speed run this like delivery mission and see if I can stay alive.
I mean, I've flagged I flagged a lot in WildStar, but it gave me a choice.
Yep.
And if someone started griefing me or just harassing me, I could turn it off and do something else.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
I ran faction missions in New World. I did it quite a bit. It was kind of fun, but also like I wouldn't want to stay in that mode all the time.
Exactly. Like that's the thing. Like you can get away with so much of that stuff as long as you have the I don't want to do this, but I can still play option. Because I don't care if other people want to run around open world PvPing. Like I'll chuckle about it when they get salty in chat. It's like a mild nuisance at best. And I might even do it sometimes myself if I can turn it off. But every time somebody does that, you notice how many people opt to turn it off permanently.
Yep.
And that should be a hint.
I loved the existence of war mode for World of Warcraft because it meant I could basically turn that off and never have to deal with PvP ever again, even accidentally. It was beautiful. So here's the thing that always is telling to me is when systems to tempt people to flag up are in games, they always put some kind of hefty reward for doing so.
Yep.
Like mass experience gain, or like that tells me it's not a fun experience. Like if you're having to bribe me to do it.
Again, you have to pay me to be the sheep.
Yep.
And that's why everything the angle that I constantly see is like, oh, we're gonna have a crime and punishment system. Oh, we're gonna have if you kill people randomly, it's gonna be bad for you in some unspecified way. Like you are thinking about the wrong person in this equation.
Yep.
That's fundamentally the wrong person to even design around.
Anyway. Yeah, like I've watched Ashes of Creation from the sidelines for a while now.
Yeah.
And it's going to be an interesting experiment when it finally releases.
I mean, Star Citizen is going to run headlong into the exact same problem. And it's going to be fascinating to see what they do about it because it's going to be rough. The game is so big and so sparsely populated right now that it mostly never comes up for the vast majority of people. But if that's ever not true, it's going to be a reckoning.
Anyway, any final thoughts? We have run a full show and probably then some.
PSA, Disco Elysium is on sale right now for like $10 American.
That is an amazing deal.
I cannot. It's what is that? 75% off. You can play it for $10 right now.
Like if you have not played this, it is an amazing game.
I've had beverages that cost more than this, and
I've been promoting Guild Wars 2 being on sale right now, which basically is like the game and the expansions through End of Dragons plus Living World for $50.
Also an amazing deal.
Like that's a decade worth of content.
A good long time.
I guess other news, Friday is early access for Path of Exile 2, and I fully expect the servers to be on fire.
Yep.
There was a period of time this week where it was like the number 3 in sales on Steam, which tells me far too many people are interested in that game for any level of demand they can even plan for. Because like they've not even hit 300K ever concurrent in one of their leagues, so it's going to be a mess.
Exciting.
Yep. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night.
good night.
Good night.
Good night.